I am Pearl Whitaker. At 68 years old, my life has settled down in a small apartment nestled in a quiet suburb of Seattle, Washington. It is my final resting place after many long years, where peace sometimes intertwines with an indescribable loneliness. Outside the window, the rhythmic sound of rain falls on the eaves and evergreen trees, resounding a gentle but endlessly reminiscent melody. The scent of old books from the nearby library, where I often visit to find old stories and future dreams, quietly permeates the air, carrying with it a layer of dusty memories that has obscured the years. Every morning, I wake up to the chirping of small birds, holding a cup of hot tea, my eyes following the raindrops rolling down the glass window, my heart suddenly filled with nostalgia for a time long ago when I lived in a town on the Pacific coast, where the waves lapped the shore and the salty taste of the sea breeze always lingered on my fingertips. I was a financial manager, a career that not only supported me, but also shaped me for decades. Precision, carefulness, and the ability to plan in detail became second nature, something I inherited from both my parents. My father was an engineer, living and breathing every meticulous drawing, every precise measurement. He taught me structure, order, and logical thinking. My mother, a dedicated teacher, instilled in me a vision and a caution before every choice. It was this combination that shaped Pearl Whitaker, who lived by a plan, not overlooking any detail, from small steps in life to every penny spent. I have always believed that careful preparation is the key to a secure and stable life, a belief that has accompanied me like a silent friend. My life was once colorful when I had Jack, my husband who I loved with all my heart. He was a talented architect with a gaze that was always bright with ideas and a heart as warm as the morning sun. Jack breathed into my neat world dreamy colors, open spaces that I sometimes forgot. Together we built a home, a roof filled with laughter, cozy dinners, and gentle love every day. But then, a cruel heart disease took Jack away too soon, leaving a huge void in me. Not just the loss of a husband, but also the loss of a part of my soul, a part of the future that we had drawn with all our love and expectations. After Jack passed away, all my love and care were focused on Connor, our only son. Connor was my pride and the only light left in my world, but also the source of many silent worries. He inherited his father's artistic and enthusiastic nature, but lacked caution and the ability to weigh pros and cons. Connor was always impulsive, rushing into new ideas like a moth to a flame, rarely thinking about the consequences. I loved him with all my maternal instincts, but that love often left me in torn situations, especially when it came to money and the stability I had cherished all my life. I still remember clearly the times when Connor fell into crisis, from one project to another, from creative business models to dreams that had not yet taken shape. Every time he came back to me, sometimes with words, sometimes just with a look of help, and I, with all the love of a mother, could not bear to turn my back. I helped, withdrew my savings to help him stand up, even though deep down, Jack's words still quietly echoed. Pearl, you need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet. Don't give her more than you're willing to lose. His words always echoed in me, like a gentle but stern reminder, especially every time I opened my savings account and looked at the amount I had saved throughout my working life. Now, as old age approaches, when I need stability more than ever, a big question arises in my mind. Will I continue to sacrifice? Can I risk losing the stability I have built day by day, night by night? Those questions smolder like a cold wind, creeping into my sleep, making the nights more restless. Until one rainy afternoon, as I sat by the window, the book in my hand closed to the sad music of the rain. The doorbell rang. It was Connor and his wife, Olivia. They came with bright smiles and hopeful eyes. I was happy to see my children and grandchildren, but my instincts warned me that something was coming. After a few friendly questions, Connor began to present a new idea, a bold business plan to open a chain of organic coffee shops in bustling neighborhoods in Seattle. Connor talked about the market potential, about passion, about ambition. Then the thing I feared most was said. Connor wanted me to invest $750,000, almost all of my life savings. The atmosphere immediately became heavy. The sound of rain falling outside seemed to echo from the depths of destiny. I looked at Connor, looked at Olivia, then turned my head to look out the window, where the raindrops continued to fall endlessly like silent tears sliding down from my own fate. Connor, his eyes shining with faith and his undisguised enthusiasm, began to paint in words a dream he had long cherished, a chain of organic coffee shops in the heart of a bustling city. His voice rang with energy, each word like a vivid brushstroke, sketching a scene of modern coffee shops, flooded with natural light, wafting with the scent of freshly roasted coffee, gentle yet enchanting. Mom, he said, his eyes never leaving me, I don't want this to be just a coffee shop. I want it to be a stop, a space where people can find peace, separate from the hustle and bustle outside, enjoying organic coffee selected from local farms that I have carefully selected. And it talks passionately about the minimalist, sophisticated design, a fusion of modern aesthetics and sustainable living philosophy, with recycled wood, indoor plants, and natural light as the main theme. Connor believes that the place will attract trendy young people, those who crave different experiences, and office workers who need a space to both work and relax. It talks enthusiastically about the cozy acoustic performances, art workshops, and coffee, all as a community connected by passion and emotion, where coffee is not just a drink, but a catalyst for memories and sharing. Connor brought a thick file of documents, color-coded market charts that illustrated the steady growth potential of Seattle's specialty coffee industry. The lines curved upward like ladders of expectations, with sales and profit figures presented in an optimistic manner. I carefully scanned each page of the exquisite 3D designs, from the modern barista counter to the cozy wooden chairs to the quiet reading area. It all exuded professionalism and a clear vision. I couldn't help but be impressed. This was no longer the impulsive, emotional Connor I had known. He brought numbers, plans, images, and above all, preparation that made people listen. Connor's wife, Olivia, also joined the ambitious presentation. A finance professional at a local bank, she was quick to offer a detailed, nuanced analysis. In a calm voice, Olivia presented a 20% profit forecast for the first year, detailing the business model, operating costs, marketing strategy, and plans for expansion in the second year. She talked about optimizing costs with technology, building a brand from social media, and even controlling the supply chain. A spreadsheet appeared: revenue streams, fixed costs, variable costs, net profit, everything carefully calculated and presented clearly. Her tone was not only professional but reassuring, as if they were prepared not just to succeed, but not to fail. I listened, paying attention to every detail, every number. My mind began to analyze like a professional reflex. As a former financial manager, I knew that even attractive numbers are just a simulation. The reality of business is always unpredictable. The market is unpredictable. However, I had to admit, Connor and Olivia had taken the time to research, prepare carefully, and build a plan that seemed more solid than anything I had seen from them before. Still, the old worries crept up quietly, like a thin layer of smoke that wouldn't be easily dispelled. Connor had never run a large-scale business before. His previous ventures, though eagerly begun, had ended in failure or failure. This time, would it be different? Was he really ready to face the pressures of managing people, controlling finances, managing risk, and fierce competition? And what choked me the most? The amount of money they needed, $750,000. It wasn't just a number, it was the result of my life savings, my financial lifeline for the rest of my life. Taking a chance on it was like betting my future, a gamble I wasn't sure I could recover from if I lost. I looked at Connor, eyes full of hope. I looked at Olivia, face calm but shining with faith. And then I turned to look out the window, where the raindrops were still falling silently, falling endlessly, like the silent waiting of fate. In that moment, a fierce struggle surged inside me. On one side was the deep motherly love, the desire to see her child shine, to live with her dream. On the other side was the cautious instinct of someone who had gone through many changes, someone who understood the price of a mistake at an old age. I knew this was not a decision that could be made on a rainy afternoon. I needed time. I needed to think. I needed to see more clearly. What was hope? What was illusion? I took a deep breath, trying to keep my heart calm, preparing for a fierce internal struggle, the struggle between heart and reason. After Connor and Olivia left, the apartment returned to its familiar silence, but my mind was far from peaceful. The piled up numbers, the meticulous blueprints, and Connor's passionate voice still echoed around me, as if they had imprinted themselves on every corner of the room. I sat down in the old armchair, my favorite seat for thoughtful afternoons, and tried to sort out my jumbled thoughts. $750,000. A huge number, a guaranteed ticket to a peaceful retirement, free of debt and worries, but also a number that could disappear in an instant if I put my trust in the wrong person at the wrong time. Memories of Connor came flooding back. Not the happy memories of the first successes, but the series of failures. I remember clearly the first time Connor excitedly embarked on the path of entrepreneurship. It was an online clothing store focusing on sustainable fashion, a humane and up-to-date idea. It was about trends, about niche markets, about the desire to change the world with eco-friendly fabrics. I was so proud of my son. I withdrew a significant amount of money to help him rent a space, import goods, and build a website. Connor worked hard, but what he lacked was persistence and long-term vision. After only a few months, the store closed because costs exceeded revenues. Inventory piled up, and my investment went up in smoke, leaving nothing but disappointment. Then came the organic farming project. Connor believed that the need for clean food was inevitable. He rented a small plot of land in the suburbs, bought seeds, fertilizers, and invested in a modern irrigation system. He spent hours in the sun and wind, reading books and experimenting with growing techniques. I, once again, could not bear to refuse and withdrew my money to help with vague hope. I had imagined rows of green vegetables, ripe tomatoes, and a Connor happily picking the fruits with his own hands. But then pests struck unexpectedly, an unforeseen devastation. The whole garden was desolate. Connor was discouraged, the project failed, and I had to bear another heavy loss. Every time I consoled myself that these were just the first steps, the necessary lessons on the journey to adulthood. I still had faith in my child, in his creativity, in his passion, and in his untapped potential. But over the years, each failure was like a sharp knife, gradually eroding my faith and more painfully, cutting into the money I had saved all my life, the coins from sweat, sacrifice, and even the silent dreams for my old age. And then the voice of my late husband Jack came back to me, clearer than ever. "Pearl," he had said, his voice steady and firm, "don't give your child more money than you can afford to lose." Jack had always been practical and thoughtful. He looked at things with a calm, rational eye. He understood Connor's character, his passion over his reason, his impulse over his plan. He knew my love for my son was so deep it could be blinding. The advice wasn't pessimism about my son, but love for me. A simple but powerful reminder that motherhood shouldn't be a financial trap with no way out. I closed my eyes, imagining Jack's face in the lamplight, his eyes focused on the drawing, then looking up at me with a warm smile. Money isn't everything, Pearl, but it is the armor that protects your freedom and your dignity. Don't let anyone, not even your son, take that away. His voice was gentle, but the words were like a knife that sliced through the opaque shell of my hidden worries. Inside me was a storm, a fierce struggle between boundless love and nameless fear. Part of me screamed to believe in him, to give him another chance to prove himself. I wanted to see Connor grow up, to succeed, to see the proud look in his eyes when he told me about what he had built with his own hands. But another part, quieter but more solid, reminded me that I had worked all my life, had saved every penny to have this security. That money was more than just an asset. It was my support when my health declined, when loneliness visited me, a guarantee for the days when I did not want to depend on anyone. If I lost it, I would have to live with a flicker of insecurity, with worries about every bill, every prescription, every meal. The prospect made me shudder. I opened my eyes and looked out the window. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still covered in gray clouds, just like my mood. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads in my life, a choice that could change the rest of my life. Should I bet everything on hope again? Or should I hold on to what I had saved through a lifetime of sacrifice? I knew this was not a decision I could make right away. I needed more time. I needed to listen to both my heart and my mind. But one thing was certain. No matter what choice I made, this decision would be one of the hardest I had ever faced. The following days passed in a simmering tug of war between my heart and my mind. The apartment was still covered in its usual quiet, the sound of rain still steady like the ticking of a clock, but my mind was in chaos like an underground storm, constantly swirling. I couldn't concentrate, books opened and closed lifelessly. The small garden seemed to wither along with my mood. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Connor's expectant gaze, then Jack's calm face. His eyes seemed to want to convey something profound. I knew I couldn't avoid the decision that was hanging before me like a hesitant knife. I told Connor and Olivia that I needed more time. They didn't push me, but they quietly built my confidence by sending me more material and information, as if to say, "We're ready." Olivia sent a long email with links to the latest market analysis on the specialty coffee industry, including inspiring success stories from independent coffee chains. Connor called more often, not to push, but to share new ideas, from brand positioning to sourcing high-quality beans. They talked about a management course they'd both just completed, an intensive course on starting and running a small business. Connor said it had broadened his perspective on risk and how to manage it. Olivia said she had used her financial knowledge to build a more detailed and solid business plan. I listened silently, trying to find a crack in his impulsiveness or thoughtlessness. But this time, it seemed like they had truly crossed a threshold of maturity. The careful preparation, the persistence in their explanations, and the determination to learn made my hesitations begin to waver. Maybe this time, Connor really wanted to prove himself. Maybe this was his chance to change, to keep my emotions from getting the better of me. I decided to reach out to two of my closest friends. First, Sarah, a college classmate, a strong, sharp woman who had been the CEO of a large corporation. I told Sarah everything, from my business plan to my worries about the size of the investment. Sarah listened quietly, her eyes focused and calm. When I paused, she thought for a moment and said, "Pearl, I understand your concerns, but look at what Connor has done. Learned, prepared, and worked hard to change, but you still need to protect yourself. If you decide to invest, make sure you have a clear legal contract. You have to be a real shareholder. Her advice was not only straightforward, but also imbued with genuine concern. Next, I went to see Robert, an old friend of Jack's, a retired lawyer whom I had always trusted. Robert was a cautious man who looked at things through the lens of the law. I briefly presented the project and the proposed terms. He nodded and listened, interspersed with a few specific questions. When I finished, he said softly but firmly, "Pearl, this is a big investment. You need a clear contract, setting out your rights and obligations. Most importantly, you must be a shareholder, not just a lender. That will protect you in any bad situation." He also advised that if I wanted a real say in the company, I should invest more, not only to gain rights, but also to help the company get off to a solid start, without running out of steam due to lack of cash flow. Those words of advice lifted the veil and gave me a clearer view of the path ahead. I suddenly realized that, while there were still risks, if I went in with a clear head and strong legal protections, this could be a real opportunity for Connor. And deep down, I knew my love for my son was stronger than my fear of failure. I wanted to give him a chance, not just to make a living, but to grow up. I wanted him to know that I believed in him and that I would always be there, despite the disappointments of the past. After many sleepless nights of tossing and turning, I came to a decision. I called Connor and Olivia and asked them to come over. When they came in, I sat on the sofa, took a deep breath, and looked them in the eyes. I've thought about it a lot. I've decided to invest. Connor and Olivia cheered, their eyes shining, and hugged me tightly. I smiled, but then added, my voice hard, "However, I have a few conditions." I said that instead of the original $750,000, I would invest $900,000. They were stunned, but I explained that the extra money was to help the company have enough operating capital to avoid faltering in the first stage. And the most important condition, I said, not taking my eyes off Connor, is that I want a clear legal contract stating that I own 35% of the company. I want everything transparent with a legal basis to protect. Connor and Olivia looked at each other, then nodded in unison. "I understand, Mom," Connor said. "I want everything to be professional. I promise I won't let you down." Olivia added, promising to work with a lawyer to draft a contract that would be thorough and protect my interests. Seeing the seriousness in their eyes, I felt my heart soften. Perhaps this was not only a new beginning for Connor, but also a turning point for me, an emotional gamble that I was willing to take. I was betting a part of my life on this decision, and I just hoped that, this time, my heart wouldn't be wrong. The appointment at the lawyer's office in downtown Seattle was arranged quickly, as if everything was running according to plan. I felt a little nervous, but also determined. This was not just a financial deal. It was a pivotal moment in my relationship with Connor. I wanted everything to be clear and transparent, without any ambiguity that could lead to misunderstandings or breakups later. That morning, I picked out my best outfit, carefully checked my wallet and papers one last time before leaving the apartment. Above, the sky over Seattle was still covered in a thick layer of gray clouds, but inside me, a small ray of light began to creep in. The law firm was located in a modern high-rise building with a panoramic view of the city. As I walked in, I was immediately enveloped by a sense of formality and professionalism. The secretary greeted me warmly and led me into the conference room. Connor and Olivia were already there, sitting straight, their faces serious and somewhat tense. That was reassuring. At least they understood the importance of this meeting. Attorney David Miller, a corporate lawyer, was a middle-aged man with silver hair and a sharp gaze. He shook my hand politely and invited me to sit down. On the table was a thick stack of documents, the investment agreement we were about to sign. Mr. Miller began to explain each clause carefully and clearly. He talked about the company's structure, the rights and obligations of shareholders, the decision-making process, and my protection in case of a dispute. I listened carefully, occasionally interjecting questions to clarify any points that were unclear. Yonder, miss. Miller patiently explained, step by step, making sure that I understood every aspect of the contract. The most important provision for me was that I would own 35% of the shares of Connors Brew LLC. The contract specified the right to participate in strategic decisions, the right to inspect the books, and the right to share in the profits. Mr. Miller emphasized that this was not a loan, but a real investment, making me an official partner in the company. Connor and Olivia sat across from me, occasionally nodding in agreement as the lawyer explained. They were serious, not impulsive or casual like they had been before. Connor even asked questions about liability, which showed that he had actually put in the time to research and prepare. Olivia also added some information about the financial plan, making sure the numbers in the contract were in line with current business forecasts. When Mr. Miller finished, he looked at me and asked gently, Ms. Whitaker, do you have any further questions or any terms you would like to review? I took a deep breath, my eyes scanning the contract once more. Every term was clear, concise, and most importantly, protected me. A sense of security began to spread through me. I turned to look at Connor and Olivia. Their eyes were filled with anticipation and excitement. I knew this was my last chance to stop, to not take such a huge gamble. But then I thought of the effort they had put in, the courses they had taken, the long days of preparation. I thought of the dream Connor had cherished for so many years. And most of all, I thought of a mother's love for her child. I wanted to believe that this time things would be different, that Connor had truly grown up. No, I have no further questions, I replied firmly. I have considered it carefully. Mr. Miller smiled and handed me the pen. I took it, feeling my fingertips tremble slightly. This was no simple signature, a signature that could change lives. I bent down, put the pen down, and signed my name below Connor and Olivia's. As the last ink dried on the page, I felt a quiet relief spread through me. Connor and Olivia both breathed a sigh of relief, then smiled brightly. Connor jumped up and hugged me tightly. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you so much," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I promise I won't let you down. I'll do my best to make this project a success." Olivia stepped forward, took my hand, and whispered a thank you with sparkling eyes. I looked at the two of them, and in that moment, I truly believed that this was a new beginning for Connor. Not just in business, but in life, in maturity and responsibility. I hoped that becoming an official shareholder with clear rights would help my son understand the importance of transparency, of thoroughness, and most of all, of keeping promises. I had put my trust in him, and now I just hoped that trust would be repaid. With the paperwork completed, I left the office with a copy of the contract in hand. The Seattle sky was still a cold gray, but a fragile peace was growing inside me. I had done what my heart believed was right, not just for myself, but for my son. Now all I could do was wait and hope for the best. The days after the deal were filled with anticipation. I wired the $900,000 into an account named Connors Brew LLC as agreed. Connor and Olivia called constantly, their voices booming, talking about location hunting, hiring staff, ordering equipment. Their calls carried a renewed energy that made me feel relieved, like I'd made the right bet, like Connor had finally found his way. I even began to fantasize about opening day, the day I'd stand on the sidelines, smiling, watching my son run his first coffee shop. One morning, as I sat by the window sipping a cup of tea and reading the news, the mail alert rang. I opened the mailbox and found a small envelope with no sender, just my name and home address. I frowned, wondering who sent a handwritten letter in this day and age when everything could be sent by email. As I tore open the envelope, a small sheet of paper fell out, and my heart skipped a beat as I recognized the familiar handwriting. Connors. I read the short line with a tingling sensation down my spine. Goodbye, old lady. Thanks for the money. The world fell away from me. I read it again and again, hoping I was mistaken, that this was some kind of cruel joke. But no, every stroke, every familiar curve, it was Connors. Every word was a knife to the heart. Old lady? Thanks for the money. It couldn't be. It couldn't be the boy I'd held in my arms, comforted through nightmares. It couldn't be the son I'd trusted to the end. My hands shook, dropping the paper to the floor, a cold feeling seeping into my skin like winter in the middle of summer. I grabbed the phone, fumbling to dial Connor's number. One long ring, then voicemail. I called again, then again. Still no answer. I tried Olivia. No response. I sent messages line by line, like someone throwing a glass bottle into the ocean, but all that came was a suffocating silence. A sense of dread washed over me. Something was wrong, very wrong. I couldn't sit still. I threw on my coat, grabbed my car keys, and raced out of the house like I was possessed. I drove to Connor and Olivia's apartment, my heart pounding in my chest as if it were a lifetime away. Each mile seemed to stretch on forever. I tried to convince myself that maybe they were going somewhere. Maybe it was just a misunderstanding. But deep down, I knew something terrible was waiting for me. When I got there, the apartment was strangely quiet. The door was locked, the curtains drawn. I rang the bell, knocked, called their names in desperation. No sound. I called again, Connor, then Olivia, only to hear the bell ringing in vain. A surge of fear overwhelmed me, swallowing my reason. I circled around to the living room window. The curtains were still drawn, but I could vaguely see the cold void inside. I squinted, straining to get a closer look. And then I saw it, a piece of paper stuck to the inside of the window. I dashed back to the front door, yanking at the handle. It was no use. I pounded on the door, calling out their names, but the only answer was silence. Finally, I climbed onto a nearby trash can and reached through the window to read the note. And then I saw it. It was Connor's handwriting again, but this time it was a longer message. Sorry, no other way. Don't look for us. I reeled. The words hit me like a hard punch to the gut. There was no other way? Don't look for us? I couldn't breathe. The empty apartment, the cold messages, and the complete disappearance of Connor and Olivia. It all lined up into a brutal picture of the truth. I had been betrayed. I burst into tears. My whole body shook with cold shock. There was no doubt about it. $900,000, my life savings, was gone. Not because of a failed deal, not because of bad luck in business, but because of a naked deception by the child I had given birth to. The pain went far beyond the material loss. It was a betrayal that cut to the core, a collapse of maternal love, of the trust I had placed in my heart. I stood on a windless street under the gray Seattle sky as if the world had turned its back on me. Everything blurred, the sights, the sounds, the breath, leaving only a deep ache and an emptiness that could not be filled. I had lost everything. After the shock of Connor and Olivia's cold, empty apartment, I returned home like a shadow, limp, numb, unable to feel reality. The familiar room was now covered in a gloomy, cold color, as if the warmth of memory had been drained. Everything around me seemed to sway, distorted, as I tried to swallow the harsh truth. I had been betrayed by the son I had once held with all my love and trust. The pain was not simply the loss of property, but the collapse of a sacred trust, of a blood bond that I thought could never be broken. I collapsed on the sofa, tears streaming down my face, as if all my defenses had collapsed. The next few days passed in a haze of tears and exhaustion. I didn't eat or sleep, just sat motionless by the window, where the steady raindrops seemed to be crying for me. I called Connor and Olivia hundreds of times, like a drowning man clinging to the last shred of hope. But all my efforts were met with a cruel silence. The phones were turned off, no messages returned. I didn't know where they were, what they were doing, or what had made them so cruel to me. In a fit of near suffocating despair, I remembered some of Connor and Olivia's social media friends. Although I wasn't a regular user, I knew Connor had a habit of posting pictures of his life. I clung to that glimmer of hope, hoping to find a clue. I turned on my computer and with trembling hands logged into my long-abandoned social media account. As I typed Connor's name into the search box, my heart pounded as if I had a premonition of something painful waiting. And then I saw it. Connor's profile popped up, and the images left me speechless. Not of an organic coffee factory, not of a business plan, but of a series of flashy moments of a life of luxury and indulgence. In the first photo, Connor stands on the deck of a white yacht, cocktail in hand, smiling brightly in the tropical sun. In the background is a blue ocean and luxurious islands. I squint and look closely. It's not Seattle. It's Phuket, Thailand, a place I dreamed of visiting with Jack. And now my son is there, not with me, but with Olivia, in a glamorous world built on my money. The images that followed were like daggers to the heart. Connor and Olivia relaxing by the pool of their oceanfront villa, raising expensive glasses of wine as the sun set. They enjoyed dinner at a high-end restaurant with the dishes arranged like paintings. Connor showing off his bright red supercar, then posing in luxury stores with luxury handbags and watches. They even took pictures with new friends, unfamiliar faces, but with the same aura of wealth and enjoyment. Each photo was an indictment. I saw before my eyes the money I had saved all my life, the sweat and tears I had accumulated, being thrown out the window for meaningless pleasures. The entire startup plan, the charts, the management classes, it turned out to be just a front for a cleverly staged drama to cheat me out of my money. From shock, I turned to anger. The anger was thick, burning like a fire that burned away every last shred of doubt. I had believed that Connor had changed, had grown up, had learned to appreciate the chance I had given him. But now I was left with nothing and a broken heart. It wasn't just the money. I had lost faith, hope, and the image of the son I had loved with all my heart as a mother. I felt a chill run down my spine. Connor, the son I had once held and raised, now appeared before me as a fraud. He had used my love, my trust, and my forgiveness to pursue his own extravagant fantasies. I could not believe that the son of Jack, the man I had loved the most in my life, had become such a person. Tears welled up in my eyes again, but this time not of helplessness, but of anger that had been bottled up for too long. I had been blinded by motherhood, had ignored the signs, the warnings, the reminders from Jack, all because I wanted to believe my son was still good, and now I was paying the price. I stared at the screen, where the images still lingered, defying my pain. A cold, steely resolve rose within me. I would not let this bury me. I would not let them get away. I wanted more than my money back. I wanted justice. I would do whatever it took to end this scam, no matter what it took. And then, like a flash of lightning, I remembered something. An old trust deed related to a loan Connor had signed. I jumped up, wiped my eyes, and dove into the pile of old papers. I knew that if there was any way to turn this game around, it was there. And I vowed I would not stop until the truth was revealed. A light flickered in my mind as I saw the lavish pictures of Connor in Thailand, a light that was faint but enough to ignite a small flame in my broken heart. Not a flame of blind hatred, but a flame of fierce determination. I would not let myself drown in pain and helplessness. An old memory suddenly came back to us, the trust we had signed with Connor years ago. He was a college student, needing a small loan to cover tuition and a few personal projects. Jack, who was still alive, had been cautious. He had asked Connor to sign a power of attorney, giving us control of his bank account in case of an emergency or his inability to manage his own finances. At the time, we had thought of it as a way to teach our son responsibility. Now, it was the only glimmer of hope I had. I hurried up to the attic, where the family's important papers were kept, and began rummaging through the old boxes. They were covered in dust and cobwebs, but I paid no attention. I searched through each file, each yellowed envelope, hoping to find that fateful piece of paper. My heart was pounding. Was it still valid? Was it powerful enough to help me get justice? After nearly an hour of searching, I found it, an old piece of paper, discolored by age, but the words were still legible. It was a comprehensive power of attorney, signed by Connor and duly notarized. The document gave me, Pearl Whitaker, full access and control over his bank account, including the power to freeze or withdraw funds in an emergency. I read each sentence over and over again, feeling a new energy coursing through my veins. My next step was to contact the bank. I remembered Evelyn Reed, an old and trusted friend who still worked at the branch where Connor had his account. We had been colleagues before I retired, and we kept in touch occasionally. Evelyn was meticulous, trustworthy, and always willing to help. I called Evelyn right away. My voice was shaking with emotion and frustration, but I tried to stay calm and tell her the story as coherently as possible. I told her about the fake investment scheme, the missing $900,000, and the photos Connor had been showing off on social media. I also mentioned the trust papers I had found. Evelyn listened intently, her voice full of sympathy. "Pearl, I'm really sorry to hear this," she said softly. "Don't worry, I'll do everything in my power to help you." She explained that a trust was a powerful legal tool that would allow me to freeze Connor's accounts. However, the process would be complicated and would require close coordination with the legal department. Evelyn guided me through the necessary paperwork. She asked for a copy of the power of attorney, a copy of my identification, and a letter detailing the situation. She also advised me to gather additional evidence, including photos of Connor's social media and any messages or communications I had with him. I followed the instructions meticulously. I printed out every photo Connor had posted, with dates and locations. I also gathered all the texts, emails, and call logs I had made to Connor and Olivia after they had disappeared. I wanted everything to be complete and clear, no gaps in the record. I spent the rest of the day working on the paperwork, as if time were running out. Every minute that passed meant the money was gone. I just hoped Connor and Olivia hadn't used it all up yet, and I could still get some of it back. Even a small portion would be the justice I needed. Once everything was ready, I emailed Evelyn. She confirmed that she had received it and promised to present it to the bank's legal department immediately. Evelyn also assured me that she would follow the case closely and keep me updated. I let out a long breath. For the first time in days, I felt less helpless. I had taken action. I had begun the journey to reclaim what was mine. I didn't know how it would end, but I knew I had done everything I could. The pain was still there, but determination had replaced despair. I wouldn't stop. The days after I sent Evelyn's documents passed slowly, painfully. Every ring of the phone, every email notification made my heart pound as if I were waiting for a verdict. I knew the process would take time. The bank had to go through every legal detail, verify every relevant information, but the anxiety, the uncertainty, the fear of losing the rest of my money kept me from sitting still. I checked my phone countless times, hoping to see Evelyn's name pop up on the screen. Then, one late afternoon, as I was quietly looking out the window at the gray clouds, the phone rang. It was Evelyn. Her voice was hoarse and tired, but there was a barely concealed joy in it. "Pearl," she began, "I have some good news for you." I almost held my breath. "We did it," she continued. "The bank successfully froze $380,000 in Connor's account." A wave of relief washed over me, so strong it almost made me dizzy. $380,000. Not the entire amount of money lost, but a number large enough to prove that my efforts had not been in vain. It was a victory, however small, that carried enormous emotional weight. Evelyn explained that the bank's legal department had reviewed the trust and confirmed its legitimacy. They immediately froze the account. Then she added something that sent a chill down my spine. Immediately after the account was locked, there were several attempts to access it from an IP address in Thailand. All were denied. The words were like a knife that turned the truth I already knew. Connor and Olivia were trying to withdraw the money. They were still in Thailand, still trying to spend their last few dollars. But this time, they had failed, and that, in a small way, made me feel like I had regained some control of my life, something I had thought I had lost when I discovered my betrayal. The change in me was surprisingly obvious. From a woman paralyzed by pain and despair, I gradually became an active person, someone who engaged in the fight to regain justice. The pain still smoldered, but it was no longer a flood that swept me away. Instead, it was replaced by a strong will and a new glimmer of hope in my heart. Evelyn went on to outline the next steps. The frozen funds would remain in Connor's account, but to officially recover them, I would need to start the legal process. She advised me to contact the police immediately and find a lawyer to initiate the necessary proceedings. I can't stop thanking Evelyn. She was not only an old friend, but also a quiet support during my most difficult time. She did not hesitate to go above and beyond her professional responsibilities just to help me get a little justice. After the call, I sat still for a long time, as if my soul needed time to catch up with the new reality. I looked out the window again. The last rays of the sunset filtered through the thick clouds, casting a gentle glow on the landscape. My life, which had seemed completely bleak, was beginning to show signs of light. I know this is only the first step. The fight is long, and there are many dark turns. Connor and Olivia are still at large and have yet to face the consequences of their actions. But I have laid the first brick. I have proven that I am not weak, that I am not a pushover, and that I will not stop. I got up, went to the kitchen, boiled water, and made a cup of hot tea. For the first time in many days, I felt lighter, my body less sluggish. A new source of vitality was quietly rising within me. I understood that I needed alertness and perseverance to continue this journey. I began to plan my next move. I would call the police. I would send them all the evidence I had, from Connor's handwritten notes to the lavish photos to the bank statements Evelyn had provided. I would find the best lawyer I could find. I would not let this go unnoticed. Connor and Olivia would face what they had done. The feeling of taking back control was palpable. I was no longer the woman standing trembling in the dark. I was the one taking action, fighting for truth, for what was right, and I was not going to stop. After successfully freezing Connor's account, a fragile sense of calm spread through me, as if I had closed the door on a storm. But I knew it was only the first step in a long battle. I braced myself for the worst, and sure enough, my phone rang shortly after. An unfamiliar number flashed across the screen. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. "Mom, What the hell are you doing? Connor's voice was filled with panic and anger, a stark contrast to the calm, eloquent manner he had displayed while he had been rambling on about his business plan. The background noise suggested he was in a public place, a coffee shop perhaps, or a resort in Thailand. I took a deep breath, fighting the emotions churning in my chest. Connor, you know exactly what I'm doing, I replied, my voice cold and firm, a far cry from the soft pearl I'd let my son take advantage of over the years. My account is frozen. What have you done? I need money to keep working here. You're ruining everything, he screamed, his voice rising. I could hear the desperation in his every scream. Business? I laughed dryly, bitterly. You call that lavish lifestyle a business, Connor? Or are you living lavishly on every penny I've saved my whole life? I recalled the images I'd seen on social media, yachts, mansions, supercars. You think I don't know? You think I'll forever be the naive old lady you'll keep taking advantage of? Connor was silent for a moment, perhaps stunned by my unprecedented determination. Then he began to change his tone, softer, with a hint of pleading. Mom, you misunderstood. I changed my business direction. I saw more potential in Asia and wanted to invest there. I need that money to invest in a new project, something bigger. You can't do that. A new project? I couldn't hide the contempt in my voice. Do you think I'm naive enough to trust you again, Connor? You betrayed me. You drained my life savings. There's no project here. It's just a blatant scam. Mom, please, please reopen the account. I promise I'll pay it all back. I'll work hard. I just need that money to get through this. Her voice started to tremble, as if she finally realized that the mother she used to be easy on was no longer there. Never, Connor, I said, each word cutting like a knife. You broke my trust in you. You ruined everything. I will never open your account again. And you know this. I will not stop here. I hung up the phone decisively. My heart was still pounding, but it was no longer with fear or pain. It was with anger and determination. I knew what I had to do next. The next morning, I went to the Seattle Police Department. I had everything ready, a copy of the investment agreement, a handwritten letter from Connor, photos from social media, and information from Evelyn about the account freeze and the logins from Thailand. I was greeted by a young officer named Miller. He listened to my story with great patience and concentration, taking careful notes. I told him about the blind trust I had placed in Connor, the fraudulent business plan he had concocted, and how he had disappeared with all my assets. I handed over all the evidence I had. Officer Miller examined each document carefully, paying particular attention to the handwritten note and the lavish photos. Ms. Whitaker, he said, this is a massive scam. With this much evidence, we have the wherewithal to launch a formal investigation. He explained that since Connor and Olivia were overseas, the case would require international assistance. The Seattle Police Department would work with Interpol and Thai authorities to track down and arrest the two men. He also assured me that while the process might take time, they would do their best to bring the case to light. I felt somewhat relieved after the conversation. At least I was no longer alone. Now I had people on my side, people who would fight with me. I filed a formal complaint and the case was officially opened. Over the next few weeks, I kept in regular contact with Officer Miller. He kept me updated on the progress of the investigation, his contacts with Thai authorities, and how they were continuing to gather additional evidence. I also received a call from an FBI investigator who said they were assisting in the investigation, specifically in tracking assets and working with international agencies. Every time I hear a new news, I see a glimmer of hope. Connor and Olivia can't hide forever. Justice will come, sooner or later. I've lost most of my assets, and more painfully, I've lost faith in my own child. But I won't let them off the hook. I'll fight to the end, to reclaim what's mine, and to make them pay for their crimes. Time passed quietly, each day a tense struggle. I kept in regular contact with Officer Miller. He was my only link to the investigation. He kept me updated on the latest information, from coordination with Thai authorities to the search for Connor and Olivia. I knew they couldn't hide under the tropical sun forever. Sooner or later, the shadow of truth would reach them. Then, one rainy morning, my phone rang. It was Officer Miller. There was something different in his voice, a mixture of surprise and quiet glee. "Mrs. Whitaker," he said, "we just got word about Connor and Olivia." My heart clenched in my chest. "Where are they, officer?" "They're at the American consulate in Bangkok," he replied. "The money's gone. It seems the extravagant lifestyle in a foreign land has eaten up her money faster than they could have imagined. They've come to the consulate begging for help, saying they're the victims of a scam." A bitter smile crossed my lips. Victims? That's ridiculous. They're the ones who did the scamming. "We have explained this to the consulate," Miller continued, "and asked them to notify us as soon as they intend to return to Seattle." I thought quickly. This was my chance, my only way to bring them to justice. "Officer," I said, my voice firm, "I'll pay for their airfare, but on one condition." "What conditions, madam?" "They must be arrested as soon as they land at Seattle Airport," I replied, without hesitation. "I want them to face the consequences immediately, without a moment's hesitation." There was a long silence on the line. Then he said slowly, "I understand. We will arrange it. We will be at the airport, ready to go." I hung up the phone, my emotions swirling. Part of me felt relief, knowing that their luxurious life had collapsed, that they were facing the harsh truth. But another part of me was weighed down with sadness, thinking of the son I had loved, the son I had hoped for. He had sacrificed everything and then lost himself in his own greed. The day Connor and Olivia returned to Seattle, I decided to be at the airport. I wanted to see them face justice, not just hearsay. I arrived early, standing silently in the crowd of waiting passengers. My heart pounded as the announcement board flashed. The flight from Bangkok had landed. A moment later, I saw them. Connor and Olivia emerged, looking tired, their faces pale and haggard. They no longer had the polished, confident look they had in their beach or luxury hotel photos. They looked around, confused, maybe looking for someone, or maybe trying to figure out how to avoid the inevitable. And then I saw the police officers approaching, their uniforms stern, their steps firm. They didn't hesitate. They went straight to Connor and Olivia. The warrant was read clearly. Connor's face was frozen. He looked at Olivia, then around, his eyes darting. Olivia was trembling, her lips pale, clutching Connor's hand as if for support. As the officers handcuffed Connor, I saw him turn his head. His eyes met mine, just for a split second, but I saw something different. Not resentment, not anger, just a thin, flickering regret in the sea of desolation. Connor lowered his head as if he couldn't bear to look at me. Olivia was handcuffed too. She started to cry, tears streaming down her already distraught face. She mumbled something to Connor, but the officers took them both away quickly. I stood still, watching their backs disappear behind the airport doors. The initial feeling of elation was gone. What remained was a deep sadness, permeating every fiber of my being. I had won justice, but at the cost of losing my son, at least for now. Yet somewhere deep inside, I felt a sense of relief. The war was over, at least the beginning. Connor and Olivia would now face the law, the truth they had tried to avoid. I had done everything in my power. I had not given up. I turned and left the airport. The sky over Seattle was still gray, but a small ray of light was starting to appear in my heart. Maybe this was a new beginning, not just for me, but for Connor. Maybe after all that had happened, he would learn what I had hoped he would learn, that no one gets to live forever without paying for what they've done. After Connor and Olivia were arrested at the airport, everything happened like a whirlwind. I was summoned to testify in court, and I braced myself for it all. Those days were a difficult journey. I was forced to unpack each layer of memory, from initial trust to brutal betrayal, from financial statements to lavish social media photos. Each statement in court was like a knife cutting into an unhealed wound. But I knew I had to stay strong, not only to get justice, but also to reclaim some of my damaged dignity. Connor and Olivia entered the courtroom looking haggard, all the swagger and glamour gone. They sat there, heads bowed in silence, listening to the accusations, facing the incontrovertible evidence. I looked at Connor, searching for a trace, however small, of remorse. And I saw it. A hesitant glance, not quite contrition, but at least the first crack in the cold shell he always wore. The trial lasted weeks. Lawyers argued, witnesses were called, and a barrage of evidence was presented. I provided everything I could: copies of investment contracts, Connor's handwritten letter, social media screenshots, and bank documents Evelyn had collected. All of it was clear evidence of their blatant fraud. Then came the day of the verdict. The courtroom was silent as the judge began to read the verdict. My heart was pounding in my chest. I didn't know what I was expecting, but I knew this would be the end of a painful chapter in my life. Defendant Connor Whitaker, the judge said solemnly, on the charge of obtaining property by deception, is sentenced to 4 years in prison. A few soft sighs of relief were heard, but I felt nothing. 4 years. Maybe it was a fair sentence, but it could not make up for what I had lost. Not only money, but also motherly love and betrayed trust. Defendant Olivia Thompson, he continued, as an accomplice, is hereby sentenced to probation and community service. I wasn't surprised by the verdict. Olivia seemed to be a shadow behind Connor. Perhaps she herself had been manipulated in some way. But then what I had been waiting for finally came. In addition, both defendants must pay Mrs. Pearl Whitaker 900,000 US dollars in compensation. A wave of relief washed over me. $900,000. All the money I had lost. Now it would be returned. The $380,000 currently frozen in the account of defendant Connor Whitaker will be returned immediately to Pearl Whitaker, the judge added. The trial ended, and I walked out of the courtroom with a strange feeling of emptiness. I had won justice. I had gotten my money back. But somehow, I did not feel happy. Instead, there was a huge void in my heart, the void of lost trust, of a broken relationship between mother and son that could not be completely repaired. The money could be restored, but the scar in my heart could not. A few days later, I received $380,000 from the bank, a tangible relief, proof that I hadn't given up. But there was still $520,000 left to be repaid. I knew the process of recovering the rest would be arduous, long, and could take years, but at least I had a starting point. What bothered me the most was Connor. After the verdict, he started writing me letters from prison. At first, they were just short, empty lines, apologetic in form, but over time, the letters became longer, quieter, more thoughtful. He told me about the harshness of prison life, about the sleepless nights, about how much he had thought. He said he was beginning to understand the extent of the damage he had done to me, that he felt remorse. He also told me that he was learning to repair machines in prison, hoping to start over when he got out. Those letters couldn't erase the wounds it had left in me, but they carried a glimmer of hope. Maybe this was a sign of real change. Maybe after all that had happened, he would learn a lesson about responsibility, about honesty, and about the love that had once existed between mother and son. I know that my relationship with Connor will never be the same. The trust is broken, and the scars will not heal easily, But I also know that I cannot live in anger and pain forever. I need to learn to forgive, even if only partially, in order to move on. And I hope that one day, when Connor is truly grown up, we can somehow mend the broken emotional bond, even if only in silence and sadness. After the final judgment, a new chapter in my life quietly began. I recovered some of the stolen money, but more importantly, justice had been served. However, the scars on my soul had not yet healed, and I knew that the healing journey would not happen overnight. I knew it was time to return to myself, to find the things that truly bring life and joy to this tired heart. I started by signing up for an art class at the local community center, guys. I had long dreamed of holding a paintbrush and telling my stories with color and shape. The class was a place of peace, a place where I temporarily left behind my pain and stress. I learned how to mix colors, how to breathe life into each line, and how to see the world with the eyes of a soul learning to heal. Each completed painting was a small step through the darkness. I painted Seattle in warm, muted colors, tree-lined streets, nostalgic old roofs. I also painted abstracts, where hidden, chaotic emotions were released in absolute freedom. Besides art, I also began to open my heart to the passion for travel that I thought had been forgotten. I no longer dreamed of luxurious vacations, five-star hotels, the things that used to make Connor crazy. Now I choose domestic journeys, quietly exploring the beauty of my country as if reminding myself that simple things can also bring deep happiness. I visited vast national parks, peaceful coastal towns, small museums with countless stories told through artifacts. I walked for hours on roads covered with yellow leaves, stopped by white waterfalls, listening to the sounds of nature as a meditation for the soul. I also sought out local people, talking to them as a way to find human connection, something I had lost during the eventful years. While I was slowly rebuilding myself, Connor was still in prison. His letters continued to arrive, and I patiently read them. He told me about his life behind bars, that he was learning to repair electronics. He wrote that he was learning perseverance, the value of hard work, and most importantly, how to live without depending on anyone. He also mentioned the times we met, how he had been thinking a lot, and what he felt now was an undisguised regret. Every time I visited, I noticed something had changed. Gone was the arrogant, aggressive look. Instead, there was a quiet, thoughtful look. Connor apologized to me, not hastily, not evasively, but with a sincerity that I had rarely seen from him. I knew forgiveness was not easy, especially when what was lost was not just money, but trust. But I also knew that anger was the heaviest chain I had ever worn. I chose to let go of some of it, not because it was worth it, but because I needed to be free. Olivia is also gradually paying off her debt. She found a stable job and started paying it off in small installments. The remaining amount is still a large number, but what I appreciate is her initiative. I understand that Olivia was also caught in a spiral of mistakes, and I hope she will have a chance to start her life over again. My life is slowly settling down. I still live in my old apartment, but it's no longer a lonely, empty space. It's where I create, where I find peace. I still hear the steady patter of Seattle rain against my window, but instead of reminding me of sadness, it now plays like a gentle lullaby, a reminder that change is natural, that even storms come to an end. One rainy afternoon, I sat by the window, a small notebook in my hand. I started writing down my plans for the future, places I wanted to visit, a new language I wanted to learn, people I wanted to spend more time with. I was no longer obsessed with the numbers in my bank account. I knew I had enough, enough to live comfortably, and enough to no longer feel like I lacked anything truly important. I smile. My life has been filled with wounds, with many ups and downs, but I am still standing. I have learned that the value of a person is not in what they possess, but in their ability to overcome pain, in their power to forgive, and in their love for themselves. I have found myself again, a version that was once broken, but is now reborn. And I believe that life still has the brightest things in store for me.